And we're live! Hello, and welcome to episode 19 of Around the Lens, your weekly visual journalism roundtable podcast, where a group of visual journalists gather to discuss news of the week related to our career field. I'm your host, David J. Murphy, a visual journalist with about 16 years' experience in the field, currently based out of Charleston, South Carolina.
And I'm your co-host, Zach D. Roberts. I'm a photojournalist who works in New York and Alaska. I've worked for the BBC, The Guardian, but most recently, my work has been seen on a news site called The Establishment.
Ooh, The Establishment, what's that about?
Yes, I know, it's fancy. It's a feminist website. I am literally the token hire.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. How's it feel to be
It says it right in my bio, actually.
How's it feel to be the token in an organization?
Pretty fantastic, considering my first piece was a huge photo essay on Donald Trump, female Donald Trump voters. If you go to the front page right now, it's there. It's pretty interesting.
I bet they're a very large group. Maybe.
Statistically, they should not be, according to polling data and everything like that, considering he has a 75% dislike among voters, which is higher than anyone else by far. So.
All right. Well, go check that out, theestablishment.com.
.co.
.co. Ooh.
Yes, yeah.
That's be different. I'm guessing theestablishment.com was probably taken. But,
probably by the establishment.
Yeah, right. Darn establishment. All right, so we got a great show tonight. We got some awesome panelists. They are Doug Strickland and David Burnett. Panelists, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Go ahead, Let's see. David goes before Doug, right? If we're going strictly alphabetically. And we are. David Burnett, photographer, contact press images for 40 years in New York City, worked for Time Life for many years, and currently in LA for several weeks. My wife is a guest professor out at the Emerson College, LA, and it's given me an interesting time to be on the West Coast for more than a day or two or three, trying to figure the West Coast out and how it differs from the East Coast. Much to figure out, actually. But the light here is actually pretty good. And let's face it, that's how we judge where we are.
Yeah. True.
I love Southern California. I spent 3 months in San Diego. It was a beautiful locale, beautiful weather. I would live there in a heartbeat if someone paid me to, because it's very expensive to live there. Doug, why don't you go and tell us about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Doug Strickland. I'm a staff photographer at the Chattanooga Times Free Press in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I've been doing this for about 7 years professionally. I've worked at a couple different papers, and I've been here for about 3 years, I think. I think it's been 3 years now, and it's kind of it's been a great place to work. They are really at this newspaper pushing projects reporting hard, and especially. They're going out of their way in a time where a lot of newspapers are sort of scaling back and piling workloads onto photographers, and they're working really hard to make sure that those of us who want to pursue long-term sort of documentary projects have the time and the resources available to do so. So that's been a really big that's part of what's kept me here for 3 years. I didn't really know where I was going to kind of land, and I think I've landed here.
That's great. A lot of news has come out of Chattanooga most recently, the shootings. Were you involved in documenting that at all?
Oh yeah, that was just completely, out of the blue, unexpected, and it was a rough several weeks, turning into several months of kind of trying to stay right on top of what was going on from the day it happened to all of the memorials, funerals, services that happened afterwards, going on until I think the last one was probably 4 months after it happened, and of course we had VP Biden come in for one as well. And it was probably the most stressful coverage I've ever done. I'd never done anything like it before. I'd never had anything sort of on that scale of horrific things to happen happen in an area that I was covering. So it was a real learning experience for me.
And it wasn't just one day, right? It was just day after day. There was something new every day, I assume. Right?
Every day it was. I mean, we had the initial day of the shooting, but then every day after that was something new, and it was sort of just one terrible situation after another, over and over again.
How's the community been now? Like, is there a difference in the community, or is it kind of come together?
There has really been a difference in the community. I think there was this. I mean, it was a really terrific coming together, for especially for the funeral of the first service member. The city really just came out and packed the highway at a scale I've never seen before in this town, because it's sort of a mid-sized city, and they really rallied behind this in a way that it wasn't surprising, but it was maybe a little unexpected, but people also seem to be, I mean, since it happened, seem to be more on edge and maybe more fearful of things, and there's definitely sort of it was like it kind of seems like our coming of age moment, where Chattanooga went from being the sleepy town that things didn't really happen in to, it kind of grew up a little in a not so good way.
Wow. Well, we're glad you're here, and glad you're able to talk to us about this and all the great topics. We got a lot of great topics to talk about tonight, so let's go ahead and get started with the show. So the first topic was actually given to us by Doug, and it's I think a pretty good topic. I'm really glad to have David here, because I think, Dave, you can provide a lot of perspective on this. Of course, newspapers are, as everybody says, they're dying, they're going away. They're selling. All the staffs are being laid off. We hear the doomsday reports all the times with newspapers, and obviously with more people getting their news via cell phone or computer or whatnot, tablet, the actual newspaper itself has been losing relevancy a lot over the years. But there's still some who think that newspapers matter. So Dallas News put together an article about this, talking about do newspapers matter? And from what do you think? I mean, obviously, Doug, you work for a newspaper, and David, you've worked in the print business, for a good more portion, if not, currently. So, what do you all think about this? Do newspapers still matter?
Well, let's take it a little bit broader. I would say I worked mainly in the magazine world for the many years I've been shooting, primarily weekly magazines. Certainly they have, like newspapers, have been clobbered on the chin by the arrival of digital media and digital dispersal of media, and the inability of most folks to figure out some way to make it either offer up enough that keeps people coming in, or somehow maintain the flow of revenue. And at the same time, I think nobody's going to be as on the local story as local papers are. And I mean, maybe that's wishful thinking, but I think people do care. I think people are interested in that local thing, whether it's the LA Times or the Chattanooga paper. I mean, each one has kind of figured out a way to live in its own space. But the main thing is, I think people have, in the last maybe 15 years, with the arrival of the internet and everything being out there and essentially seen to be free, you have at least this huge proliferation of content, pictures everywhere, way too many pictures, crap putting good stuff out of the way. I mean, it's hard to get for good pictures to kind of rise above it. I mean, they tend to go viral. That one picture from Brussels 2 weeks ago was maybe a pretty good example of how that woman, grabbed her camera and started shooting as soon as the thing happened. A woman from the Georgian television. There is still a place for still pictures, and that I am convinced of. a little bit more iffy is exactly what's going to be the way in which that gets handled. And I know that, I don't know, it's got to be 15 years ago or so, there was a pretty good example of a newspaper figuring out how to embrace that digital world. And that was the Lawrence, Kansas, I think it was the Eagle Tribune. Bill Snead, who passed away recently, a longtime friend, had gone back and worked there. And at the time when this all was beginning, instead of just throwing their hands in the air and declaring their hair on fire, for God's sake, Tyrone, it's my photo watchdog. That this is like a real life here, people. They kind of lit up the whole of downtown with free Wi-Fi, and the drop page got you to the newspaper, and it was one of the very few cases in which, instead of just a bunch of suits trying to figure out how to make money with it, they kind of offered it up in a way that would bring people to the site. And I don't, honestly, at this point, that's been a long time, I don't know what it is, but I remember being struck by the fact that they were at least thinking outside the box. At the time, everybody was just trying to figure out how to make paywalls work and stuff, and I don't think that's tended to be very successful for most papers. But again, I don't know. I kind of see it as an observer from the outside, but I do remain convinced that there's far too many pictures out there and it's a struggle for the good ones to get seen.
I've got to agree with you there for sure. We're just inundated with visuals all the time in the modern world, and as much as I dearly love Instagram for being a showcase for photographers, Instagram is at least partly to blame for some of this, as well as, you know, just the rise of, I mean, we all know, being professional photographers, there's a culture of anyone's a photographer,
Yep.
and the more we see photos, you're right, the harder it gets for things to sort of bubble to the top that really are the quality work. Especially when, you know, you see all the time people complimenting photos that really there's not really anything special about them that makes them, you know, particularly noteworthy or memorable. I mean, I scrolled through my Instagram feed an hour ago, and I follow talented photographers, and I follow, you know, the Washington Post and New York Times and stuff, and you know, I probably saw 30 or 40 photos when I scrolled through. I couldn't tell you what any particular one of them was, though.
Yep.
And those are, for the most part, I mean, good quality photos too.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, obviously the amount of imagery out there, especially the amount of high quality imagery, sort of dilutes all the imagery. It all becomes just sort of part of, like you said, the stream. It's just content out there. You absorb it for a few seconds, you move on. You're not really on one particular image for a long time. But, you know, in that regard, then, do you like the newspaper because of that? I mean, because the newspaper. Okay. So, do you print a newspaper in Chattanooga, or is that?
Oh yeah. We're still. In fact, we just installed a new printing press last year.
Wow.
So
well done.
the newspaper kind of doubled down on print in an area when people aren't doing that, and it was partly because we were on a Flexo press, and it was costing us more than this. Ultimately, we're going to save money, but still, you know, it's a big deal to install a new printing press in this day and age. And I think, to kind of get back to the topic, you Dave alluded to this a little bit. Newspapers have this great role in curating the news and presenting it to you in a way that makes images more impactful. Like if you look at that link on the Dallas Morning News photo blog that we're talking about, you know, they've got a scrolling sort of list of section fronts, and nothing, you know, you might see one of those photos on your Instagram feed or on Facebook or something, and it wouldn't necessarily have the impact on you that it does run full bleed on the front of the sports page. Or, you know, there's an important role of curation that newspapers have in showing you the right images and showing them to you in a way that makes them hit you the hardest. And I think in that sense, it's still very important.
I mean, here's the thing. It's like I love newspapers for what they represent, but who actually reads a newspaper? Like, David, do you still read newspapers? Zach, do you still read newspapers?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we in Syracuse, which is the closest major city for me that would have a newspaper at all. I think we're down to the Post Standard is down to I don't know how many days a week, and the Sunday paper is like super thin too, and it's like really sad. But
Music, dance, break.
Music intermission. So we just don't have the inspiration really is not really out there. But it does this conversation reminds me of there's a famous two covers, Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Tribune. I don't know how many people remember these two covers that came out the same day. When it was right after Chicago Sun-Times laid off their entire photo staff quite famously, and then the Chicago Tribune actually I believe expanded their staff a little bit, and Chicago Sun-Times gave everybody cell phones, gave all their reporters cell phones, no one else, and so when the Chicago Blackhawks won the Stanley Cup, the two photos, and Petapixel, I'll show the link. Has the two covers next to it. One is this tiny little frame of this sad yellow photo of a guy holding on to the cup, looking like this.
And
like,
he looks kind of depressed.
You know, yeah. And then the Chicago Trib, which normally has like amazing photos because they have a great photo staff, and took a photo that was like full above and slightly below the fold, like ridiculous quality, you know. And I go, to me, that should have been the argument right then and there. If the Sun-Times actually cared about journalism as opposed to making money, or even people caring about their newspaper, you know, the brand loyalty that websites, BuzzFeed cares about, everybody on the Sun cares about. Even as photographers, we have to care about, you know, things that people caring and knowing that they can trust us. That should have been their moment and go, oh crap, okay, we got to hire everybody back. Hopefully everybody will, you know, not demand huge pay increases or anything like that. But they didn't, and they, as far as I can tell, based on my friends in Chicago, have faded quite a bit because the loyalty just went away, you know. And that's one of those things that why every single time we talk, you know, whether it was NPPA did a study about professional photography versus the kind of like you were talking about the glut of photography that you see on every website everywhere, on Instagram, on anything. They did one of those eye focus studies, and they found that, I forget what the percentage was, but basically by far majority people looked at professional photography versus the kind of just, okay, this is an illustration, we're just going to throw this here. It was taken with cell phone, or it was just taken by an amateur or whatever. And I don't know. I mean, every time we have we've had this discussion a lot on this podcast. It was like, is photojournalism dead? Which is the constant, you know, conversation that every journalist has at some point. Is journalism dead? And I go, well, no, it's not, and it never will be. It's maybe evolving. Hopefully, we can all keep their jobs. Basically, that's my that's my kind of thing. It's just like, yeah, it's evolving, and it'll still be around, and you know, I mean, it's going to be around in 5,000. It's going to be around in 500 years. Is it going to look like this? No. We'll all have glasses on that, you know, can take photos, because that worked out so well for Google.
David?
I can tell you, as somebody who I was either the last or the next to last photographer hired by Life magazine. Actually, Kennerly was hired a couple of weeks after I was, so it was his fault. I closed the magazine. This is December of 1972, the weekly Life magazine that had been going since 1937. That was it. That was photojournalism is dead. And, well, that was the most obvious embodiment of it, but it also had with it all these issues about they were printing 8 million copies a week, and they couldn't print that many. If they could have somehow figured out a way to just get it down to 1 million, they probably would have stayed in business, but they couldn't figure out a way to go from 8 million to 1 million. Meanwhile, I'm kind of like wandering around like I was the 26-year-old kid. I just signed on with the magazine when the torpedo hit, and I started working for Gamma, the French agency, 6 months later, and all of a sudden, a whole new world opened up. And I'm sure this has happened, like you say, it's just every generation goes through some iteration of, is photojournalism dead? And if it's dead, how is it dead, or why is it dead? And what is dead?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I mean, Nietzsche said, you know, is God dead? Or, well, if you flip it over, it probably was like, is photojournalism dead? And in both cases, they're probably, no, it's not. It's gonna, I think you're right. It's gonna, you know, 40,000 years ago, photojournalism was Cro-Magnons painting buffalo on the inside of a cave in France. And today, it's what we all do, and who knows what it will be. I mean, I just watched 2001 Space Odyssey, which was made in the, early 70s, I guess. I can't remember exactly the year it came out. I think 72 or 73. And there's a moment in which, projecting to the future 25 years, there's a moment in which the famous scientist arrives on board the space station before they launch to the moon, and he's having a meeting about this monolith, which were later treated to by Stanley Kubrick, who was, by the way, a great photographer.
But he was.
And and there is a guy who comes in there with a camera that makes no noise, and he just fires a couple here, and then says, "Thank you, Dr. Forget his name, Dr. Haywood Floyd," and he walks out of the room. And it was like, man, that must be the future, because that camera didn't make any noise. So last night I was at my daughter's. She's an actress in LA, and I had my LX7 set on electronic shutter so that it basically would make no noise.
Yeah.
So it only took 40 years to get there, but you know, one little by little.
It was only 15 years late. You know, it was supposed to come out in 2001.
Well, I know. Really. We blew through that like we did 1984.
Yeah.
You know?
I just always think whenever we talk about this conversation, is photojournalism dead? I think about the lithographers, or whatever the name would be, of Harper's was it Harper's Weekly or Quarterly? I forget. You know, the people that would do etchings or whatever, and be like, oh, visual journalism is dead. And be like, it evolves, guys.
You know,
I just hope we all get to keep doing it, whatever it evolves into, and making a living doing it. That's
the question, right?
I mean, we all keep doing it. I mean, like, I've been doing it for the past year. Whether or not I've been making money doing it is a whole different story.
Exactly.
But I think that's part of the problem, is that the people who are making all these decisions on the business end, and certainly the Chicago paper is one example. Time Inc., you see that now with this whole contract issue. Yeah. It's as if the people in charge have no understanding or design. You know, and this is a company that pays all of its top people big bucks, but they're trying to chisel every little nickel they can get out of the people who actually create the content that is the magnet that brings people there in the first place. They have nothing to sell. They have no spaghetti sauce or Buicks to sell if they don't have a reason for people to either come to a website or pick up a magazine. And the only reason that the people will pick up a magazine, it's to see the pictures, and then then you'll maybe read the story. But nobody picks it up just to start reading a story. Like, you need a picture, you need that visual hook to drag people in. And I think it's terrible to see the way it's just kind of been so devalued by the people in the business. And it's these business people that are kind of, you know, they keep bringing in the McKinnon, you know, the efficiency experts. Well, we don't really need all those photographers. We can certainly look at it. And then that's what leads to, if I may add, that's what leads to people walking into the photo archive room of a newspaper and saying, geez, you know, we could put a couple of workstations there, and taking the entire morgue and throwing it into a dumpster. You know, 50 or 60 or 80 or 100 years of history. And it's still happening all the time.
There's a fantastic story in this month's NPPA magazine, which if you're a member, we plug this every time. If you're a member, you get for free. I mean, you have to pay for the membership, but you get the magazine kind of for free. But there's a fantastic story about a magazine finally, or a newspaper, going through their archives and finding like all these famous photos with all the negatives that were supposedly these famous Pulitzer Prize winning photos that they thought all were missing. And then finding all the negatives, and now they have a Tumblr or something like that that gets more traffic than most stories do. So it's
I'm actually working on something kind of similar to that. So we're the Chattanooga Times Free Press. We used to be a two newspaper town. It was the Chattanooga Times and the Chattanooga Free Press. I'm sorry, the Chattanooga News Free Press, which was an ironic name, and so we, when the papers merged around the year 2000, for whatever reason, I don't know why, all of the Chattanooga Times negatives from 100 years of history got put in the, like Dave said, in the dumpster. No idea why. And for whatever reason, most of the News Free Press's negatives are missing too. I have I have 3 boxes of negatives that somehow got saved and are in a back room, and I've been going through them and trying to find just interesting photos. And I'm thinking about like an Instagram thing where I could call it like the last 3 or something like that, where it's
Wow,
sad.
It's really sad.
It's terribly sad. It breaks my heart to think about. And some of the Free Press archive, some of the negatives may be at like the Chattanooga History Museum, something. We're not entirely sure where they are, but they're not in the newsroom.
Yeah, I worked for a guard unit out in Long Island, and they had a huge history, huge backlog of negatives and imagery from going back to like early 1900s. And I mean, I didn't destroy any of it, obviously, but I didn't do anything with it. I worked a full-time job there. I didn't have time, although. Had I had more time, or I had ideas about scanning that in and publishing it, or saying like this today in history type of thing. But I think it's just a manpower issue. But it's really sad to hear that they're just throwing away this stuff. I mean, how hard is it to archive negatives? You throw them in a closet and they're fine. At the minimum, throw them away. Jeez, how desperate for space would any organization be to just throw away negatives? That's
but you know what? This exists in people's lives on an everyday basis. Everybody's got a family that had a bunch of pictures in a shoebox, shoebox perfect width to put a 6 negative strip in. Mm-hmm. And when you move, and everybody ends up moving, well, we've got the scrapbooks with all the pictures. Why do we need this other stuff? Let's lighten up. And all these millions of negatives have been thrown out. I mean, this is one of those things that just drives me crazy because it happened in my family like everybody else. The negs are the gold where all the good stuff is, Or
the silver, because there's silver in them negs.
Well, this is more. I mean, not even just family history, and not even just some newspaper losing their archive and some potential for extra clicks. Like, this is our history. Like, this is our nation's history. The fact that there isn't some large scale project, honestly, I'm finding that all these like individual newspapers are having to dig through their archives, hope to God that it's in some closet somewhere in some basement that hadn't been flooded or something like that. The fact that I don't know, it's almost to the point that our government isn't stepping in and going, okay, so National Archives, we have $1 billion budget for the next 5 years. We're going to make sure that every single photo of any historical value is archived at some level. Because I mean, we were talking about this last week, where now that we're all freelancers and everything's digital, it's all it's my responsibility, it's your responsibility to make sure the archives exist. And I mean, I'm sorry if it really comes down to it, or a fire happens in my house, God forbid. I was just talking to the insurance agent about things. So
Zach, that light is really close to your roof.
Yeah, please don't.
Just letting you know.
Now that I had a talk with Geico about getting renter's insurance, now I'm super if I don't get it, now something's going to happen. But we're responsible for our history's archives now. You know, I mean, you think about half of the photos from like Ferguson, half of the photos from Occupy Wall Street. I barely know a single photographer. I know 2 or 3 photographers that have important photos from Occupy Wall Street that are like AP or Reuters. Almost all the important photos that I know of taken during that of historical value to me were taken by freelancers, and even freelancers for AP or Reuters or whoever. So I doubt that outside of the handful of shots that are uploaded to, to Corbis or whoever, there's no other photos that exist.
Well, and here's the other thing with those sorts of. I mean, we're all archiving, but we're all archiving digitally too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you said, what happens if there's a fire and my hard drives go up? But even beyond that, what happens 50 years from now? When we want to look back on this kind of history, how many of us can say that we print photos commonly anymore, like prints that you can hold in your hand? Well, what happens if 50 years from now there's no? I mean, have you tried to use a printer from the 90s? What's when we look back to try to access this stuff? How are we going to get it?
Try using a USB plug from 2 years ago, or try charging your iPhone. Try charging your iPhone from 6 months ago. Like, good luck.
I've got everything on a SyQuest drive. I'm good to go.
All technology I use is from the 90s. Just put it out there.
I actually have a Neanderthal carving photos into the cave wall down the road, so I'm good.
Okay, you're the good backup. And of course, everything's in the cloud now.
Exactly,
I mean, we store photos in the cloud, but what is that? I mean,
what is the cloud? What is the cloud all about? I mean, really? Like that movie?
No, and the thing is, all of your friends who aren't photographers and they have everything in their phone and they take a lot of pictures and maybe they'll get uploaded. Oh, it's in the cloud. You're right, it's in the cloud, whatever that is. But you can be sure that in 10 years they'll have probably 5% of those pictures.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Everything's going to die. It's just going to go away. There are no hard drives that are going to last that long. The interfaces will be too weird, and it's like, oh, I would have thought that would work. It's like, you buy a new Mac, and then all of a sudden it doesn't run the old software, and they don't actually make that a selling point, so that you're not really aware of it, and that all of this upgrading stuff, and particularly pictures, it's doomed, pretty much, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true. It's not a photograph until you print it.
Yeah.
It's like that statistic where I've heard, we say like we create more content, that's ever been created in all of mankind every day or every hour. But you know what? I bet we lose just as much content, lost to digital, entropy, or people throwing away stuff, or deleting stuff, or hard drives failing, just as often. I mean, I back up my stuff continuously on new hard drives. Like every time a new, larger hard drive comes out, I'll just like throw it all on there. I've got I think the biggest I have right now is a 6 terabyte drive. But I mean, if. How
do you do that? That's a really good question. How do you know? I mean that totally honestly. Like I've got. Hang on. Right, so this is like a 4 gig WD drive. I love it. It's got all of my early 2015 material on it.
I love your placement, by the way.
I have it backed up on a couple of bigger Seagate drives at home. But how do I those are USB 2 or 3 drives. I mean, what way other than just drag it over and come back in a day and a half is there to copy this stuff? I mean, is there an easy way to do it? Because it's not easy, that's why people don't get around to doing it.
There are some automatic things, but they don't. They seem to do things like mirroring. So if you don't want to have it on your laptop anymore, which how many of us can store every photo we've ever taken on our laptop? The sort of automatic backup stuff doesn't seem to. I haven't found anything that works really well.
And it's not just a matter of working, it's a matter of relying on it. Do you want to rely on some automatic process? I don't. So I literally take and plug both the hard drives into my computer, and I will do a transfer from one to the other.
Just a drag and drop.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, it sounds like it should be. It sounds kind of archaic, but I want to ensure that the the data moved. And usually I'm moving from a smaller hard drive to a bigger hard drive. So I'm adding like multiple hard drives onto that one hard drive. And again, it's just a verification thing. I can see it moving. I can double check it after it's moved. And then I can take those old hard drives, and I don't delete them. I just put them on my shelf because it's like those are another backup. But now I have it all backed up on my 8 terabyte hard drive. And then I'm also backing everything up to the cloud via, I think I use CrashPlan or something like that. And it's just automatically, it's unlimited, and it's just constantly up there. I think I have like 9 terabytes in the cloud right now. And that's the way I do it.
That's,
Tell me what that's called again.
CrashPlan?
Yeah.
And
I think $5 a month for unlimited space.
I've started using Dropbox too as sort of an added backup. I don't put my whole archive in there, but like once I've processed photos, just sort of like I kind of keep like a year's worth of an archive in there. So as soon as they're exported, they go into that Dropbox folder, so they immediately get backed up in the Dropbox cloud. So if something does happen to whatever machine I'm working on at the time, I can still access it from somewhere else, and that's a little bit of like of a peace of mind thing.
It's one of the big reasons why I recommend the site that I have my portfolio site on is Zenfolio. It's like 100. I don't know if it's still the price. I was actually just having this conversation with Angel, a former guest, I think, about like what to do with hard drives fail and everything like that. But Zenfolio has like unlimited, at least JPEG upload. So I literally have edited archive basically of anything that if I had to like run out the door and never come back to my home again, sort of thing. It's all up there, and I could kind of hopefully restart my career, sort of thing. You know, that sort of emergency plan. So I'll upload if I go to a Trump rally, as opposed to uploading like the 5 shots that I sent or 10 shots that I sent into my wire. I'll upload, 34 or 40 shots up to that site, and then you have a choice of hiding them or making them public or not. I just make everything public because I know no one, like, outside of the first page, no one goes to portfolio sites. Like, I hope to God that, people are looking through my photos and trying to decide about things, but whether to buy a print or something like that, but I know that no one does that.
That's terrible news. I'm shocked. I'm shocked. Gambling is going on in this establishment.
I spent over a year in Alaska, and I have Aurora photos that were bought by the Discovery Channel and all these things like that. Never once have I ever sold a print through my website. I had someone ask I photographed a union rally a couple years ago in Alaska, and I had someone ask to buy a print from that. Literally the only time anyone has ever done that.
Prep sports.
It's just all archive. I know. If I could stand sitting around at a high school sports rally, I would do it, but I just can't.
But then you'll get parents who'll come up to you and say, "Oh, that was such a great photo you took of my son," and they'll show you the photograph of your photograph with the watermark that they took with their cell phone of their computer screen.
Yeah, no, I know.
I think then the consensus is buy newspapers.
Yes.
Continue to buy and read newspapers. They're a great source of photojournalism, and they're important.
Please subscribe to the Times Free Press, please.
Now, before we move on to our next topic, David, do you have to go, or can you hang out with us longer?
I've got to run, actually. I'm sorry, but I would love to join you another time.
Okay. Well, no, I was glad to have you on.
Can I do that?
I really appreciate your insights, and we'll definitely love to have you on again another time.
Okay. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you. Appreciate it. See ya. Bye.
Bye. All right, let's go on. Let's move on to our next topic. We're going to get kind of meta right now. Now, if you're listening to this show on your podcast listener of choice, if you download it on iTunes, I really appreciate your patronage, and would love having you listening to us. But, podcasts are a big way of life for me. It's honestly how I get the majority of sort of my media. Like audio media. I mean, I don't really listen to music very much. I don't listen to commercial radio very much. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I love podcasts. That's why I decided to make a podcast. Now, this show, of course, started out as just a podcast, but since grown into, of course, what you're watching right now, the live stream, and many different things to go along with it. But I listen to other podcasts as well. Some of the ones I've kind of promoted in the past are This Week in Photography, of course. But what are some of your favorite podcasts? What do you listen to? At least related to visual journalism, photography, filmmaking, or anything really.
I've listened to 3 podcasts like ever. I'm not big. I'm kind of a newbie to podcasts. I like the Photo Brigade's podcast that Robert Kaplan does a lot. I've listened to probably 5 or 6 episodes of that, and I'm definitely a fan of that. But it really wasn't until I had to take I think it was a 6-hour drive to West Virginia for work that I really even considered podcasts, and I listened to Serial the whole way up there, and the whole way back. Finished the whole thing on the trip there and back.
Both seasons?
First season.
Okay.
And Welcome to Night Vale, because I heard something about it on NPR.
I haven't heard
that's
that
really
before.
it for me. It's kind of a spooky. It's like NPR in a spooky desert town where spooky desert town things happen. It's entertaining, but I can't speak eloquently about podcasts because I don't have a lot of experience with podcasts.
How about you, Zach?
I think we've personally had this conversation before. Where I just outside of Radiolab is which by the way, Doug, I highly recommend Radiolab if you're not like a huge podcast person. It's edited like crazy. If you're doing the one thing I recommend Radiolab if you're a video editor or if you're a photographer trying to figure out how to like start editing and start thinking about how to take conversations and make them interesting for kind of general consumption, not just like posting an interview up and hoping it'll do well. The way that they edit the interviews, like where they'll use the intros and outros, and then John said, and they'll cut in John saying something. It's absolutely amazing because it just flows seamlessly. And I've learned slowly. I've learned how to do a lot better video editing by just even listening to that, and it's an audio podcast. But yeah, no, it's fascinating. It's also super interesting topics. Like they'll take like the weirdest topics imaginable, and like there's this episode on the Galapagos Islands, and they turned it into one of the Radiolab producers went on a vacation there and just happened to walk into a local election. So we covered the local election, and it was by far the most fascinating thing I think I've ever heard on radio in my entire life. But the other one, I mean, photography-wise, again, Kaplan's. I write for them, so occasionally I listen. He still hasn't had me on yet, which is starting to piss me off. Kaplan, if you're listening. And then Petapixel. I listen to every once in a while. But
they have a podcast?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yep. We've had him on the show actually before. So
yeah, Sharky James was one of our first panelists on episode 3, I believe, or something like that.
Very nice guy.
Awesome. I will check that out.
Yeah, but for the most part, I'm a book on tape person. Because I used to subscribe to Audible, so I have I think I still have like probably 2 weeks worth of straight listening of books that I could listen to because that's the way I've a really weirdly hard time reading lately, so by ADD or whatever it's happening. So audiobooks, like I'm listening to Jane Mayer's book called Dark Money right now, and like I've got like 8,000 ideas for documentary films just by listening to that, and that's kind of how I go through things. But
I think I haven't been big on podcasts in a lot of ways because doing what I do, I spend a whole lot of time in the car, and if I'm in the car and I'm working, I'm usually listening to a combination of NPR and the Police Scanner.
Yeah.
Which you wouldn't think go well together, but they kind of weirdly do.
Well, they're both sort of monotone, speaking, talk shows, if you will.
One's just a little bit harder to understand than the other.
We've talked about doing our more NPR-type programming on this show, but it doesn't work too well. So. Sorry.
And we have a robbery down the lake, and 2 dead. We need backup now.
No.
Anyway. That's another show. We should do a show called Police Scanner. It's just people talking in NPR tones.
Oh my God, that would be horrible.
They're talking Police Scanner.
As long as it's not like Chicago Police Scanner, that would be terrible. Based on our a guest we've had on before, Marcus will send me transcripts from Chicago police scanners, and because you know how many murders they have, and the police are just kind of just straightforward and honest about crap. So
Yeah.
it's quite interesting.
Yeah, around here it's more often the like, well, suspect is walking down the middle of the street with his pants around his ankles, and thankfully less often the serious stuff. Although it happens.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Yes, I also listen to Petapixel, and I know we've talked about podcasts sort of as addendums to different topics, but I just wanted to kind of bring it up as one of its own. Again. I love podcasts. I love making them and love listening to them. I don't have a big love in my heart for general interest photography podcasts because I just, if I want to listen to something, I only have so much time to devote my ears to sounds that come into them. So I want to make sure that I devote that time to things I'm really interested in. So yeah, some of the things I listen to relate to more, you mentioned you love NPR. So, I mean, a lot of shows on NPR have podcasts that correlate to them. So, This American Life, if you love Serial, you'll love that. And then if you love Serial, you also love everything from Gimlet. Gimlet Media is a podcasting company that makes podcasts. They're all, well, not all of them, but a lot of them have that same sort of intonation, the same sort of storytelling. The one podcast that's all about the creation of Gimlet is called Startup. And that's a serialized podcast each week after week, telling the same story.
Okay.
But in terms of podcasts that help me out, again, Petapixel is great because I just love the condensation of the week's news or a couple days news into like a little bite-sized thing I can listen to, and honestly, that's about it with regard to like visual podcasts. Although I do love filmmaking podcasts. Anything that's about either the art of film or creation of film, that's a really big sort of draw for me. And I use the Podcast Addict app on my Android phone. You guys use the iTunes or the Android or the iOS?
Yeah, I just use iTunes.
I think I switched to Podcast Addict now. Addict.
Welcome.
So I don't know. I kind of I've had this Android phone for like 3 years. I still don't know how to use it at all. Like I just basically have like probably 400 apps or something like that on it. I'm like, I don't know where my podcast app went, so I just download another one.
There you go.
That's what it's become.
That's the way to do it.
Since this phone has space on it, as opposed to every iPhone I've ever owned previously that the operating system takes up like 80% of the space, and then you've got 4 gigs, and you can't expand the memory because Apple. But anyway.
Exactly. Well, Doug, I hope you subscribe to our podcast on your phone. That would be much appreciated.
Everyone listening should do that too, by the way. Just even if you don't listen, just subscribe. Just do us a solid.
You don't have to ever listen to the show again. Just subscribe once, leave it there. That's all I need. I just need that number.
Then delete it from your hard drive after it downloads.
Well, it doesn't actually download unless you choose to download it. So, exactly. But no, everybody listen to the show, download it, subscribe to it. It's all helpful. Respond. All right. So let's go ahead and move on to our final topic of the evening. Of course, gear talk. Lots talking about stuff, and I thought this was sort of an April Fool's joke when I originally saw it. And who knows? It could still be an April Fool's joke. I don't know. It came out on April 1st, but essentially, for us filmmakers, stabilizers are very important because you want to get that nice, smooth shot when you're shooting. Petapixel shared a story about someone using a shopping bag as an in-the-pinch stabilizer. So you should check out the link and see how they do this. But essentially, they cut a hole in the bottom of the shopping bag and stick the camera on the floor of the shopping bag, looking through the hole. And it legitimately looks like it works. Like it actually gets you a pretty decent stabilized shot. So I'm asking you guys is, do you think, one, you'd ever use this, and two, what do you think about stabilizers in general, and do you use them, for your work?
Doug? I think we lost you audio-wise, Doug.
Oh no, Doug!
There we go.
There you go.
This is the mute button is hit. So if you've seen the video, it's so it's not like a plastic shopping bag or anything. It's like, think it like a gift bag that you give somebody a gift you don't want to wrap in, and it's just it seems like the silliest, most impractical way to get a stabilized shot. You can't see anything that the camera is seeing. You can't. I mean, the example they use is sort of following someone's feet up the stairs, because I think that's the only thing you could possibly use it for. And I
it would have to be a low shot, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I think it would pretty much have to be a low shot. Maybe if you've got an articulating LCD screen, you'd be able to look down into the bag and see what's going on.
Yeah.
But it also seems like a great way to get yourself arrested for like being a peeping Tom, trying to get like upskirt video and stuff. Like all it takes is somebody who thinks that you're doing that, and your day is ruined.
Yeah, it's now specifically a law, peeping Tom law. It's actually upskirt law or something like that in Boston or in Massachusetts in total. Like, even if you're like generally taking photo of people, it's really, you can't, basically just don't take photos of people anywhere near stairs. It's illegal in Massachusetts now.
Wow.
But yeah, I didn't think about that until you said that. But yeah, that looks completely. I mean, I'm trying to think of the like dozen of other ways that I've done stabilized shots. You know, but now of course I can't think of any. But yeah, I mean, it's for that one shot where you're following the feet along, you know, someone's feet along or something like that with like a super wide angle lens, so you don't have to worry about what exactly is in frame. Yeah, that's a great thing. I mean, like I think we all, you know, especially I find especially in journalism, whenever you're trying to do, if you're trying to do something more than the standard stand-up shot and kind of, you know, ENG camera, photojournalism style of stuff, there's always a way. We always find weird ways of doing it. I mean, I find honestly the combo of a monopod and Premiere's stabilizer works better than anything else. Always just shoot whatever's in your frame. Give it like, you know, at least a couple, you know, at least you know, maybe I guess on the LCD screen, give it a 1/4 of an inch around the edges. Make sure that nothing's in that frame, and then just hit the stabilizer button, and it looks smooth. I mean, you'll get that kind of like gliding smooth look, which is a question whether you want that or not. But I don't know. I mean, like for the most part, if I'm holding my camera just doing an interview, I just hit that button and then it works fine. You know, I don't know anymore. Maybe it's lazy, but yeah.
Because I usually do a similar sort of thing. It's either on a tripod or the monopod, or if it's like when I do try to hand hold it, it's, you know, I'm holding it like this as close to my chest as I can get it, and I just rely on the stabilizer later, which is maybe not the best way to do it, but I can't. I haven't paid for a camera stabilizer either, so.
They're outrageous, and they don't work in most situations. I mean, like the few times I've hilariously seen somebody with the huge rig, and I remember seeing something. I'm trying to remember if it was Ferguson or if it was Chicago NATO. I think it was Ferguson because it was a newer camera, and they had the full freaking rig, and like it was the wires and everything like that, and they were trying to move through, and I'm like, that's gonna last 15 minutes. Like the moment that the police shoot something. Shoot some tear gas, and everybody comes running at you. I'm like, it's super nice that you're so smooth. The best thing that I recommend all photographers, and this is something I learned from my good friend Rick Rowley, who's the Academy Award nominated documentary producer and cameraman, won Sundance Cinematographer Award. He did Dirty Wars. If you highly recommend see that film. He also did Michael Moore's newest film, which is weird because he didn't tell me about it. But it's basically push-ups. Push-ups and your arms. Like if you see, I mean, you see those old ENG guys, like who have like they look like Teamsters, like half of them, because they have to lift a 30-pound freaking camera up on their shoulder and move it around and occasionally, you know, carry it on a handle on a low shot. Like those guys know how to keep a camera stable. I've started doing. It sounds really weird in this segment, but I started aggressively doing push-ups, and I have like right here. I have a 5-pound weight, and David's laughing his ass off right now. And this is what I do if I'm just like I've got one hand and I'm doing internet searches for research and stuff like that, and I now, like the last couple times I did interviews, hey, everything's super stable because I can hold a 3-pound or 4-pound object like this, for a couple minutes and it's fine. It also works great if you're ever trying to shoot video with a telephoto lens, which is something that I've started doing at you have to do at Donald Trump rallies because he doesn't allow access to anywhere. So you have to shoot it like this and hope to God you can see. And that's also why I really want to buy a new camera with a flip LCD so I can see what the hell I'm shooting.
Yeah.
But anyway.
I'm guessing you're probably also using a thigh master that we can't see, right? At the same time.
No.
Oh, okay.
No. I'm all upper body day, and I skip leg day every day.
Oh no, you don't skip leg day.
He's not telling us about the kegels, though.
Yeah, I use. I think I've shown it on this show before, but I use it's just a simple GoPro 3-axis gimbal, brushless gimbal stabilizer from a company called Neewer that makes lots of cool camera gear in China. But it's a really nice. I mean, getting those, I know what you're talking about with those brushless gimbals, the big rig he's talking about. That's we have one where I work at, Ronin. It's called the Ronin from DJI, or at least that's one of the brands, one of the companies that makes it, and it's a really nice device. It's really great if you've got a camera, like that's, I would say 1 to 8 pounds or so. And then they have one that's like for larger cameras, but yeah, it's also super duper cumbersome. But this little GoPro stabilizer thing I've got, it's great for things where it's super light and it's super high quality, smooth picture. It's also super small, so that'd be great for something like the protests and whatnot, where you're trying to run around. And two, also you can get one that has a mount that goes like a GoPro mount. You can stick it on like a helmet cam. It has a helmet. If you have a helmet mount for the GoPro in there, you can stick it on there, and you're set. So I know you have a helmet, Zach. So you could use it, but just a nice alternative to the big old thing. But beyond that, for camera stabilizers, I also have one of those sleds, I guess, where you stick the I use for my bigger cameras that I can kind of move around, and it has like the weights at the bottom, but that thing really gets you on your forearms and your elbows after a while, and I can't do it for very long. But it's good for getting cool shots, and also getting it from a high quality or higher quality camera. So I've used that a couple times. Beyond that, I have a shoulder rig which I've used for shooting video that it kind of keeps things pretty stable, and that's about it. I have used a legitimate Steadicam rig. With the whole harness and the arm and everything, and those are pretty cool, but those take a lot of time to stabilize, and just a lot of maintenance to keep up, and that's why there's like a whole Steadicam operators union that you hire specialized Steadicam operators for that type of stuff. But I think with the 3-axis gimbals and stuff like that, that's something that you can do by yourself, if you can get them to work, and if you don't mind, obviously, the big and the bulk and stuff like that. Good for shooting things I'd say are more controlled, like perhaps fiction or something on a set versus something out in a protest or whatnot. Hopefully that guy didn't get a Molotov cocktail to the face or anything.
No, I just remember seeing the guy later on without it. So that's literally the reason I remember it distinctly, is that the first day he had the whole thing, and then the next day he didn't.
Realized quickly it didn't work.
Yeah, no, especially in tight crowds and stuff like that. I mean, I figure that I've seen I think it's at some of the rallies, the guys that do the circus, that Showtime documentary about the campaign trail. Which I've heard is good, even though every scene I've seen from it is absolutely boring and terrible. The camera work looks interesting. I'll give them that. But I saw those guys out there, and they had like a big rig, and they were shooting with DSLRs and stuff like that, at least as far as I could tell, which was certainly interesting because you kind of stand out in a crowd of photojournalists, and usually it's photojournalists or ENG cameras, and then there's a handful of guys with C100s or C300s, and that's about it. But I don't know. I don't see a lot of stabilizer systems out yet. So, but I don't think a lot of photojournalists are shooting with DSLRs that much video that they probably need that. But I could be wrong. We'll probably see a lot that whenever somebody comes out with something that's cheap and affordable, I think that'll be the thing. Because I mean, narrative filmmakers seem to have. I used to be one. We kind of have like a different budget, I think. Like we can spend, $1,000 or $2,000 on, yeah. Well, you can spend, the money's in different places. For me, my money goes into my car so I can get places. When I was a narrative filmmaker, my money was going into gear so I could get that shot that was in the location that was hopefully nearby me. And I could see myself spending $1,000 on a Zuccotti rig, or Zuccotti, was it? Zuccuto? Was Zuccuto? I don't know. Anyway, one of those expensive metal rigs. Zuccuto, yeah, not Zuccotti, not the park where Occupy Wall Street happened. But yeah, so I could see that happening. But
all right, well, let's go ahead and before we go to our picks of the week, we're gonna go and basically end the show after the picks, but we're gonna be going and doing a bonus topic. So if you want to listen to the bonus topic, like right after this show, if you're super eager to get it, go to patreon.com/aroundthelens, throw us a buck. That's all we're asking for is a buck, and you get the bonus topic immediately. If not, you got to wait like a week. So go there now, put some money towards it, and you get the bonus topic where we get to talk about another topic. We're going to talk about self-doubt. So it's going to be exciting stuff. But anyways, definitely want to plug the Patreon page. Please, it'd be great if we can get like $100 a month from patrons. That'd be awesome. That's our goal eventually, and we can throw that towards developing the show and advertising and making the music better and all kinds of good stuff. And giving a couple of that to Zach so he can, work on his car and maybe buy a new tire or something for that. Whatever is going on with the car.
Finally, afford to get an Aston or a lower third for my name.
Yes,
that's the goal.
We can afford. We can go to Google.
Zach's lower third.
Zach's lower third fund.
Yep.
Every day, Zach has no lower third. Donate to patreon.com/aroundthelens.
For less than the price of your morning coffee, you can make sure that Zach has a lower third.
For just $1 a month, little Zachy can have his own lower third.
I got to say, as a person who works in nonprofit journalism that is always begging for money and everything, to me, the whole coffee bit for just the price of your coffee is the worst possible thing you could ever say to someone. The idea of like, I'm sorry, if the choice is between a starving child in Africa or my morning coffee, like, there's a ton of other things you could say, like between that and then like, take out my, the donut I'll buy or something like that or whatever. That's fine, but my morning coffee, not gonna happen.
Yeah, but then you can't hold that camera steady like you've been practicing to.
See, it's all about. I have a arc that I work out through the day. Is that the coffee hits, and then around 4 or 5, I start with the whiskey, and then that evens me out. So it's all about. I'm a well-tuned, like 34-year-old classic car. Mind you,
so what you're saying is exactly you need uppers to get you through the day, and then downers to sleep.
Mind you, if you put a classic car that was 34 years old, it would mean there'd be a 1981, which there really wasn't that many good cars. I mean, if you saw what the Mustang looks in 1981, it was not pleasant. So anyway.
Hey, by the way, speaking of age, I'm now 35, so I just had my birthday on March 31st.
Happy birthday!
Thank you. If anyone wants to get me a birthday present, donate money to patreon.com.
You're the elder statesman now.
Woo! Oh, I feel so dignified. All right, well, let's get on with the picks of the week. Always let the panelists go first. So, Doug, well, you actually already gave us our pick of the week. That was our first topic. But what's your other pick of the week?
My other pick of the week, my emergency pick of the week. This is actually, so it's a couple of weeks old. It is the New York Times photo story about Cuba. So they ran it, I think it was the day before President Obama visited Cuba. And it's this great photo essay that really shows just moments of daily life in Cuba. It's absolutely worth a look. It's also got kind of a weird thing that people have been asking questions about since it ran. So the photos are all uncredited. The one photo credit on the page is photos by the New York Times. And so individual photographers, whether it may have been one photographer, it may have been multiple, but for whatever reason, the Times made the conscious choice not to credit them, which I think is also sort of an interesting thing, and they didn't disclose why. So.
Interesting. Definitely go check that out. Maybe we'll figure out why they didn't do it, and we'll talk about it on a later show.
Yeah.
Zach?
That's fascinating. Mine is just noticed civil rights era photographer Bob Edelman passed away. He was 85 years old. So, but if you search his name, he's one of those guys. I mean, I think that all photographers, we kind of all have this problem that we maybe want to be remembered, but the only way they will be remembered is a photo. And that you know so many photographers, but you don't know their names. Like the guy that photographed that kid and the child in Africa with the vulture behind it, but you may not know Kevin Carter's name. But this guy, Bob Edelman, if you basically just do a Google image search for his name, you're going to recognize probably 80% of his work. He photographed I Have a Dream speech. Photographed civil rights protests. I mean, so much going on, and it's just unfortunate to lose one of those guys. Just trying to, everybody go search his name. Hopefully, we'll get, maybe we can get that name trending as opposed to some Hollywood celebrity, because they passed away or something. But anyway, that's a sad moment. But yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully we can get Around the Lens trending if we get that name trending. We'll be right next to it.
Yeah.
I have two picks this week. One, we just had April Fools, April 1st, pass us, and of course every April Fools, everybody likes to put their jokey jokes on the internet and trick the gullible, but also the rest of us just get a good laugh out of it. So there's a link to a whole bunch of different photography-related April Fool's Day jokes, and then there's another link I included this week, which is all about the Alexia Foundation. Essentially, judging began on the Alexia Foundation. I'm not sure if it's still going on or not, but the Alexia Foundation is just a great overall photo competition, but also grant-giving agency. They help produce actually a story for Tim Matsui, and Tim Matsui is going to be a guest on an upcoming show. Go to our Facebook page. Facebook.com/ATL podcast to find out when that is, and also like it while you're there. But again, the Alexia Foundation, great organization and based out of Syracuse, and hopefully we'll find out who the winners are next week and we can talk about it. So that's pretty much it for the show. Doug, why don't you go ahead and tell people where they can find you at?
Yeah, you can see my website. It's dougstrickland.com if you're interested in seeing any of my work. And you can see me just about every day at timesfreepress.com, too, which is our newspaper's website.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I'm, as always, ZD Roberts at zdroberts.com, on Twitter, ZD Roberts, on Facebook, ZD Roberts, and probably anywhere else you can find me. Reddit. Well, actually, I'm not Reddit, ZD Roberts, but anyway. I won't tell anyone my name there. Nope, that stays secret.
So you're deaf.
Actually, it's not that Zach Roberts on Reddit, but yeah.
So I'm gonna go and create a Reddit that's called ZD Roberts, and then I'm gonna go to all the despicable subreddits and list like everything, just so the SEO comes back to you. No, I wouldn't do that. You can find me everything related to DJM Photo, djmphoto.com, and then all that for every single social network you can think of. Just Google it; it'll show up. But of course, I always like to push. Of course, is our website, aroundthelens.com. You can find everything we do related to this show there. You can link to us via all the fun social media networks you can find, and connect to also me or Zach via that website as well. And all our panelists, past and present, who have been on the show are also listed there. So go on there, go check it out, listen to some shows. Again, go to Patreon, throw us a few schmeckles so you can get the bonus content we're going to talk about in just a minute. And also go to Dropbox.com and sign up for an account, and then put djmphoto@gmail.com and is the referral, or follow the link that's in the show notes so that I can get more space on the Dropbox and continue putting this show on one Dropbox. So that's pretty much it from us this week. I want to thank our panelist, Doug, for being on the show, and of course, for Zach Roberts, I am David J. Murphy. This has been Around the Lens, and we're out.